Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism midweek special. Normally we do discuss things happening globally, and we will at some time in this week, but now that we're in a general election period, let's sort of, all bets are off and we're just going with it. And I thought it was appropriate this first midweek after the election was called to bring in some of the combatants, for want of a better word, campaigners, whatever you want to say, familiar faces to you all, and certainly people that Through Scottish Prism has more than a passing interest in. And one of them is our Sally Hughes up there in Perth and Kinrossshire. Sally, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism.
It's great to be back, Roddy. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh yeah, well, you're understart. Well, you're more than understarters or unders. They're off and running. We'll talk about that in a second. And of course, we couldn't have Sally or Indy for Indy in Perth and Kinross without having a one for Alloa and Grangemouth. So it's our Eva as well.
Hi, Roddy.
Eva, how are you?
I'm good, yeah, very busy, hectic, far too much going on and not enough hours in the day as per usual.
Well, that's what it's all about. And we've also got, for all of you who are not fortunate enough to have an independence for independent candidate or a good independence candidate that you feel you're able to vote for, we've also got the other option here for you, and we're glad to have Alan Petrie of Not My Parliament with us today. Alan, welcome back.
Hi, Roddy. Good to be back. All raring to go to free our country.
That's what it's all about. So I know, if I can start with you, Sally, I know you've been campaigning for quite some time. You've been pounding the streets and getting the leaflets out and getting things together. I don't think I've had a chance to speak to you since the election's been called. Are you ready to go?
Yes, it's kind of a relief, really, that we've now got a date. I never really bought into the experts saying October, November. I just thought they're not going to want us, especially the independents for independent, they're not going to want us to have the time to cover the ground more thoroughly. So yes, I think it's going to be an insanely busy 6 weeks. I'm just concentrating on doing the best I can, really. Good help, though. So,
well, I've got to apologise because I was one of those smart arses that thought it would be in the autumn and said to you as such. And I was quite, as if, what do you know?
Were not alone, Roddy. You were not.
I have to.
All the experts were saying, no, don't worry. All the MPs in Westminster, they're not going to. They're worried of losing their seats. There's no way they're going to allow. And I'm like, yeah, but they can't afford to lose Scotland, and they can't afford independence to get any kind of win, which independence for independence would reignite the movement. Yeah, that's the biggest thing from a security point of view from the British establishment, because they can't afford to lose us, and we're the cash cows. So
yeah, what we didn't factor into our calculations was that Tories, the money they get as MPs or cabinet ministers actually is pocket money. It's not the big stuff to them. And we didn't allow for that. Different for the SNP types and the Liberals, who it's their big income. They want to go as long as possible. So, well, it is where we is. We is where we is, and we're going to have to make the most of it. Do you have a plan in mind, Sally, how you're going to run it?
I've managed in this sort of phony war to get my leaflets, one set of leaflets done, and I've created a banner that shows you the map, territorial waters area of Scotland and England, and it's to scale, and it shows the oil and the gas dripping down to London like an intravenous drip. And that says it all, really. And once you explain to folk on that map that is to scale and that is Scotland's territorial waters, thank you. It's back to front on the screen, Alan. But But once you see that, you never ever forget it. And you can see people literally stop in their tracks when they see that, and they go, and you can see them thinking, and they're like, well, what else have they been lying to me about, you know? And I'm constantly amazed that we're sort of 10, 12 years down the line in this campaign, and the experts haven't used this to any great extent, or there have been variations of this, but the graphics have been really mediocre or beige, and nothing pops. And I'm not an artist or anything like that, but it's like, make it stand out, you know. You just, so it's amateur hour here, and I'm afraid, well, amateurs are doing pretty damn well, you know. And the cynic in me says, yeah, perhaps all the political parties have been deliberately pulling their punches, or keeping their powder dry, as they would rather refer to it.
Well, I'm more cynical, Sally. I would suggest that it's because you're an independentista and you're up against some unionists and a devolutionist, who was also a lousy piano player. That's why they didn't do it, because they're not really interested in independence, unlike you. Now, listen, folks, if you're going to walk throughout this programme, along the bottom, Techie will be putting up how you can come along and help, if it's you're going to help Sally or Eva or Alan. And Techie, could you stick up Sally's details there along the bottom now, if you're in the Perth and can rush your seat, or if you want to go up and help out, there's a phone number for you, there's an email address, and there's also a daily meeting point as of Wednesday, the 29th, and up to and including the day of the election, up to Friday, the 14th of June, right? I beg your pardon, in the parking ride, and you can meet there. So keep that running for long. We'll come back to you in a minute, Sally. So over to you, my friend Eva. Again, we had a quick chat about this the other day, but you're having to get things together. Are you ready to go?
Well, we've already started, albeit that we don't have the substantial campaign materials that Sally's got. But we've obviously been out and about speaking to people, making videos. There's leaflets on social media, and there's lots of plans in progress in relation to public meetings and various elements of the campaign. You'll know particularly, Roddy, that it's a long time now since I first started speaking about standing against John Nicholson, not because I want to be an MP, but because I think that his performance as an MP for this current constituency of Ochil and South Perthshire has been less than par, particularly his representation of women and the issue that we have regarding gender reform and single-sex rights generally. So it's a matter of record that I had claimed that I wanted to stand against him. It's also a matter of record that the boundary changes that have taken place only very recently have meant that my home county of Clackmannanshire is now divided, so that part of Clackmannanshire has been removed and put into the constituency of Dunfermline and Dollar. The other part of our constituency that has gone is South Perthshire, and instead the remainder of Clackmannanshire is now joined with Grangemouth, Lardbert, Stennismuir, etc., so that the seat that I had always wanted to stand in is now slightly different than that which it used to be. So this will be a new experience for John Nicholson as well as for the rest of us, but it remains my home area because I continue to live and work in Clackmannanshire, and I continue to attend the local courts, which are obviously Alloa, Stirling and certainly Falkirk. So I have a lot of contacts with people who also live and work in the constituency, and I intend to maintain and build upon those contacts. My selling point is that I am local as well as being independent, and certainly I think I'm well known as a campaigner for women's rights. So my angle will be slightly different from Sally's, but certainly have very much in common, particularly in respect of the drain on Scottish resources, and we really must emphasise that.
And as you say, you live locally. You've not been parachuted in like some carpetbaggers, as they're called. I think that's the technical term for them. I wouldn't ask you to say that either. It's better having someone uncouth like me saying things like that.
No, but I think people who know me, who know anything at all about me, know that I live and work in Alva in Clackmannanshire. I was an SNP councillor on Clackmannanshire Council in the 1990s, and I've run and operated businesses in Clackmannanshire and in Stirling since I started work way back in the 1980s. So with the exception of a couple of months in Alan's great city of Dundee, my entire career and my entire adult life has been spent in Clackmannanshire. It'll actually be a wrench when I'm elected to have to go to Westminster, albeit the intent is to be there only for a few days.
Hear, hear, that's what we want to hear. Now, folks, and again, you'll see, Techie, can you stick up there for Eva's details at the moment? If you want to get in touch with Eva to help out, there's going to be lots to do. Eva's getting everything, all our wee ducks lined up in a row, as they say. But get in touch and let us know if you're up to do anything, whether it's canvassing, knocking on doors for Sally and knocking on doors for Eva, delivering leaflets, whatever you do. We're also going to need people at some time to fold leaflets or, you know, stick them in envelopes or something, or anything. Every little bit helps. Be in touch, folks. But if you're not lucky enough to have Sally or Eva in your constituency, can I just say, what you could then have is not my parliament, and who better to tell us about that than Alan? Alan, you don't have a candidate. We know the history and the backstory to this, and this is why Not My Parliament appeared. Are you geared up and ready for this fight?
We are definitely geared up and ready for this fight. We are just waiting for leaflets to come forward, and we'll be out in the streets campaigning, delivering them through doors, having street stalls. We have speakers all ready to come and do street meetings. I mean, we are ready to go. We are going to have the old-fashioned razzmatazz election campaign. We're going to make sure people know we are here, what our plans are. And without even starting this campaign properly, our message is already out on the streets. I don't know whether anyone saw the Courier article about Alba's launch. Their candidate from Broughty Ferry and Arbroath said he had been out speaking to people, and many are saying they are spoiling their ballots. I'm trying to convince them to vote for a proper person. Our message is out there already, and we are going to make sure Not My Parliament defeats every single candidate in Dundee and sacks Westminster. And we're going to also support Sally and Eva to win their seats so as they could take the letter of dismissal down to Westminster for us.
Yeah, good stuff. And of course, folks out there, if in your constituents, as I say, you haven't got an Eva and you haven't got a Sally, and you don't want to vote for any of the ones that you see, you don't fancy any of them, then get in touch with Alan. Techie, can you stick up Alan's details? So we'll just keep running them all in rotation, if you like, Techie, throughout the show. Get in touch with Alan if you want help. You can help people set this up in their neck of the woods, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, all they need is people to go out and do the doorsteps. If they've got a PA card, get out there, get street work done, high visual profile with campaigns like this. That's what we need. Because there's no way we'll be able to get every single door. Now,
what do you say to the people that say, oh, it's spoiling the ballot?
Well, what I say to them quite clearly is every single ballot that is put in the ballot box is counted. Every single spoilt paper is not only counted, but it's identified as to how it is spoilt. Now, if, say in Dundee, we manage to beat every single candidate, what that means is the people of Dundee have made a democratic decision to reject every single candidate and the Palace of Westminster. The Westminster government has been rejected from Dundee. That means the government will have to impose an MP on Dundee, which will clearly identify Scotland as a colony for international court intervention.
That's brilliant stuff, Alan. And if you're paying attention, folks, you know, that's what to do. There's you can get in touch with Alan if you want to be doing that and getting on with Not My Parliament. Because even if it's, you know, it'd be great to beat all the candidates, but 5%, 10%, 20% sends a message, sends a big message, and that's what we've got to do. Sally, you're going to go with, you know, your famous "Let's get the heating back on." And how's that playing on the doorsteps?
Well, I've been getting a phenomenal response. Initially, I was going around my businesses, the industrial estates, and absolutely blown away with, as soon as you say I'm not in any political party, it's like, oh, tell me more. And then as you say, and I'm for independence, and they're literally taking the leaflet out of my hand. And I'm just going to speak to business folk and the staff and asking if they'll put it around the staff room, you know. And some of them are saying, oh, I'm putting it on, have you got some more? I'm putting it on the bunker for the customers. I'm putting it on the wall for the customers to read. And you think, wow, I mean, that's just, I've never had that before. And I've never said, I mean, obviously Perth, traditionally it was conservative with a large C, and then it's been SNP for a while now. But when Perth and Kinrusha, this area, voted no in 2014, it was 60% no, round about there. It was one of the higher no votes. And I've always felt, as I've campaigned and argued and discussed this, that was pretty accurate for this area, as much as I would rather it was different. This is the first time the impression I'm getting, and it's just a gut feeling, is I think independence is sitting at 60% now. Support for independence is sitting at 60% in this area, and I have never said that or felt that before. And there's an absolute disgust and fed upness with the SNP for not delivering on any of their mandates, on any of their duties. They're in serious trouble, and not because of me, but I'm just giving folk hope. I mean, I'm literally getting smiles. Folks saying, "Oh, I'll vote for you," you know. Oh, that's fantastic! I'm so pleased, you know. And you couldn't make it up. So,
but it's also their self-inflicted wounds. I agree with that. I had a guest article this week from Neil Mackay who encapsulated it. You know, not using the mandates, not moving, not campaigning for independence. It's disgruntled a lot of people. But you're right, Eva, we've discussed it so many times that we've always felt and known that for a long time now, there has been a majority in favour of independence that's lacking the political will most of our politicians to go for it. Have you noticed a difference when people know that you're standing as an independent for independence?
It's exactly as Sally says, people are switched off from party politics, but as soon as you say that you're not in a political party and you're standing as an independent, their eyes begin to light up because they understand that as an independent, you owe a duty and you owe everything to your electorate. You are there to represent their views and their interests and their needs, and your loyalties are not divided, because you don't have to consider loyalty to any party. And the public have really cottoned on to that. It's been a Scottish tradition from time to time over the years, particularly in Highland area, that you would often have independent local authority councillors. But independent MSPs and MPs are, you know, they're not quite like hen's teeth, because we've some very memorable, such as Margot MacDonald, Dennis Canavan, etc. in Holyrood, at Westminster. But I think that the public want a change, and they see that it is not happening with the SNP despite the innumerable mandates that they've had. And I think the public is coming round to the notion that independence for independence is a win-win for them. They get a local candidate, in the case of both Sally and me, who knows them, knows the area, knows the local issues, but also understands the national picture, which is that for local areas to thrive nationally, Scotland has to thrive and prosper. And that is a tale that's going down well on the doorsteps and out on the stump. And I think that will only continue to improve. I also believe quite firmly that Rishi Sunak and those around him know perfectly well that amongst the general population of Scotland, there is quite a sizable majority for independence. And that's one of the reasons why the election's been held now rather than in the autumn, because the longer that it was left, the greater the possibility that there actually did become either greater numbers of independent candidates like us, or chance of unity amongst the political parties for independence, as well as the independent candidates too. And that can still happen. As we've said before, Scotland will elect 57 MPs. if 29 of those had in their strapline and in their manifestos that they were standing deliberately and simply and solely on the priority of achieving independence, then a majority of MPs and a majority on the popular vote comprises a mandate to go international and to demand international recognition, enabling us to actually negotiate the terms of the independence settlement without having the begging bowl of the Section 30 and the referendum, or a process whereby the power to hold a referendum might come back to Scotland again. These things would become unnecessary were the MPs elected on that basis. That's the old basis that was spoken about before devolution, that all that needed to happen was a majority of independence MPs be elected, and nothing in law has changed that position. The fact that we have a devolved assembly or parliament in Edinburgh now is actually neither here nor there, because the people of Scotland are sovereign. And if the people of Scotland elect a majority of independence-minded MPs with that popular vote in the majority too, those two aspects lead to international recognition, because Scotland is a country in its own right and the Scots are a nation, and we will have held a democratic election, the result of which requires and demands international recognition and respect.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think I can also state quite clearly that neither Sally or Eva are looking to be Madam Speaker, or to get peerages, or to be in a pop band down there with unionists, and certainly won't be settling down. If that's you, if that works well for you folks, vote for Eva, vote for Sally. And if it's not your constituency, not my parliament, and if you want to go and help out and fight for real independence people, here's two for you. I have to say at this point, Derek Kerr was going to stand in Edinburgh, but the calling of the election so quickly, he didn't have time to get things set up, and it would have not been a proper campaign. So he was caught out, but he will be back. He will be an independent for independence at some other time, believe me. He's still committed to that, but it just couldn't happen. The days were against it. Alan, down in, I think Eva and Sally have alluded to it about independent candidates. Jeremy Corbyn, for example, was standing as an independent candidate down in his seat in Islington. And I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I think I'd be putting a fiver on that one. But there's another 14, I believe, Labour-type independents, and we've got George Galloway's Socialist Party and people that are ex-colleague Yvonne Ridley standing as an independent in Newcastle, their hometown. While everyone's sort of writing this off and thinking, no, this is a Labour shoe-in, there could be a shock in store.
There's going to be a lot of bloody noses after this election, that's for sure. People are getting sick and tired of party politics. Because party politics look after the party, stuff the people, promise them the earth during the election campaign, and shaft them afterwards. It's went on for far too long, and people are now starting to wake up. They know that this parliament, because it doesn't matter which party you put into this parliament, the parliament runs things. You're just changing bums on seats. And their main goal at this present time is to go to wars, because wars make a lot of money for them. They're putting our children, our grandchildren at risk of having to go and fight their wars for their funds. That's got to stop. And by voting for the parties, it's never going to end. We have to do something different, and that is by putting independence up, or putting Not My Parliament onto the ballot paper and rejecting the Westminster system totally. But in Scotland, there's a couple of things that I've heard on the internet. Some are independent supporters saying, vote for any party that has a chance of beating the SNP. Now, if you do that, you're voting for unionists. If you vote for unionists, their vote goes up. The independents' vote goes down. And what that'll do is take people back off the electoral register, because they'll lose heart. We can't afford to do that. So if you've got that in mind, forget it now. If you want to do something for independence movement, then vote for the independents for independence. And if not, then write on your ballot paper, Not My Parliament, because both these options keeps the independents vote high and the unionist vote as low as possible. The other thing that some people are saying is that they won't go out and vote. That's what the system wants you to do. They don't want you to go out and vote. That's why they've brought in the voter ID, so as the poorest people in the country can't get a vote. The vote is what hurts them, but not by playing by their system. And again, it's break their system. Don't vote for the party puppets. Vote for the independents for independence, or they're not my parliament, and sack the parliament. That's what we're being put across. Staying at home isn't an option. Vote for unionists isn't an option. If you want independence, there's two ways of doing that. Independence for independence, not my parliament. It's the only two options that we have.
Absolutely. You know, it's not yet an issue. Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sally, but it's only recently announced this fact that they're talking about bringing back in national service. I'd love to know how they're going to fund it and everything, and do it. But if they're doing it when it becomes an issue, you know, it's really quite worrying that we're going back the way and we're talking about putting people into national service. And as usual, the ones who'll get the exemptions will be the richer kids, the kids who can go to university or get a reserved occupation. It's going to be as usual. The ones at the lower end of the rung who are going to end up getting into the British Army, possibly go and fight in Ukraine, insanity as it may sound. It's quite a worry.
It's a serious worry, and there's real sort of, I mean, they say you need to know your history so that you don't repeat the mistakes of the past, and there's an element in society that doesn't see it as mistakes. It sees it as tactical methods that they can deploy when it suits them. And there's real echoes of the lead up to the World War I, where the Irish won at the ballot box their home rule, and it was all postponed to send the troops to the trenches in World War I. And so that there's echoes of that. Andrew Bridgeton, who's a Conservative MP in England and who has broken ranks because of the excess deaths around the world, but particularly here in the aftermath or during the lockdown. Now he's investigating the science to that, and he's been ostracised by his own party and by Labour, because once again there's an indication that the two cheeks of the same broken system. I'll be polite about it. And he said this week that Sunak has resigned because we're already at war with Russia. They just haven't informed us. He spoke to the Russian ambassador who told him, and Sunak has resigned because he doesn't wish to be a wartime prime minister. So that's, this is not a guy who would say that lightly, because he would be thrown out of the House of Commons for saying that if it wasn't true, and he couldn't back it up. My dog is desperate to get out. I'll be back in 2 seconds. Apologies. So I'll be back in 2 seconds.
We have a thing about dogs in the Prism show that they're always looking for bigger dressing rooms. Well, I know it's something that's close to your heart. Is the biggest thing probably, Eva, is equality and women's rights. I suppose they're neck and neck for you. But it was just come out just before we started recording the show, and again, you've got to doff your hat to the Reverend Stu. He's put out an article today saying that 66 women, homeless women, have died in care in the years 2019 to 2022. Mm-hmm. That's happening in our country, one of the richest countries in the world, even under the British banner. But Scotland, such a wealthy country, natural resources, 60-odd homeless women have died in 3 years. How can that be justifiable? And they tell us you're better off in the union?
Systems and processes are breaking down, certainly throughout the UK, but especially from our interested perspective in Scotland. Obviously, we've spoken before about the housing emergency that the Scottish Government have just declared, and that was preceded by various cities declaring individual housing emergencies. And from my point of view, it's an absolute tragedy and an utter disgrace that we're talking about housing emergency and vulnerable homeless women when we've had an SNP government since 2007. They've had 17 years to address this. Had we elected MPs who'd have gone to Westminster and settled up, not down, would have been building houses. We wouldn't have a housing emergency, and a lot of these people that have perished or suffered unnecessarily in Scotland would have lived far happier lives and would have survived under a safe, warm, or in a safe, warm home under a safe roof. There's, I think, in excess of 30,000 folk homeless in Scotland in a year. Many of those are families who tend to get accommodated, but not always, because not all local authorities are actually able to provide emergency accommodation as and when it's needed. There's substantial bodies of evidence right round the whole of Scotland that there is an ongoing crisis unfolding in terms of emergency homeless accommodation. And that's on the one hand. On the other, when you've got councils that are strapped for cash, you've also got private landlords and hoteliers raking in massive sums of money for providing temporary accommodation. These aspects can all be addressed along the lines proposed by Alec Neil at the weekend in the context of having a proper house building company in Scotland, where we build our own houses from scratch, we draw in money from pension funds and elsewhere, we employ people. It kickstarts the building industry to a large extent, and it does nothing but good. There's no downside. But we've got that housing emergency, just like we've got crises in other areas, whether it's the police, the courts, social work service, generally the criminal justice. We've got issues there because we are a devolved country with limited resources and limited powers, and devolution has come to the end of the line. Scotland won't get any better. Life in Scotland will not improve under devolution. It's not possible. The leaps and bounds that were made under Alex Salmond's tenure are still there, but they will become dismantled. By now, we should be in a position where not only were we independent, but we'd be able to have, for example, universal free school meals, universal free childcare, lots of universal services that as a country we actually can afford. The reason that we don't have them is because, unfortunately, since 2015, we've not elected sufficiently strong and strong-minded, independent-minded MPs who've been able to demand and persuade the international community that a majority for independence means just that. And that's what we need to do this time.
Absolutely. Because here's the other thing, Alan, today it was announced. The SNP have suspended all work on independence during this election. I need that explained to me, Alan, because I always thought that the raison d'etre of the SNP was independence. Now, even if they say, well, it's, it's bad form to do that during a British election, that would make me, if I was the leader, all the more, really? And then double it, put twice the work into it. It's quite appalling, and then to admit it, I just can't understand these people.
Well, remember what the court said. The Scottish Parliament do not have the powers over the Constitution. Only Westminster has the powers over the Constitution. So why are they running away from the Parliament that's supposed to be the only place that has that power? Because they're devolutionists. They are not interested in independence. And for the last 10 years, I would say, never have been. They enjoy supping the gravy from the train. They get their slippers under the green benches, and they're quite happy just sitting there taking their money while our children go to school hungry and bed cold. That's unacceptable. And it's time that people woke up. Party loyalty is doing this country too much damage. Now, going back onto the housing issue, one of the problems that we have isn't just housing. It's the fact the departmental politics that go on within the civil service. You've not got the social work working with the housing department. You've not got the housing department working with the health board. You've not got all the systems working with the police. They've got to all start working together to get a proper policy to help people. Because there's many people that are homeless that giving them a house isn't good enough, because they'll be homeless again within another couple of months because they don't know how to pay their rent, they don't know how to pay their bills. They've got to be taught these things. They've got to have the support mechanisms around them, and without that, we're pissing in the wind. It's just a cycle that these people are going through. You also got within the community services, you've got thousands of hours of unpaid work backlogs because there's no place to put these people to work. Yet we've got thousands of empty houses that are needing repairs done to them, that they could work together to get this up, to then help with the people that are homeless and getting the support into these accommodations. And on national service, I mean, the other option, you've got option of going to war, or the other option is volunteering. Do these people not know what the word volunteering means? It doesn't mean forced labour. It means you're volunteering your time to go and get yourself new skills and to help out organisations that you want to. But I'll give a warning to any organisation who is thinking of taking part in this national service, any voluntary organisation, that people will remove their support from you if you start implementing slave labour into your organisations. That's not what the voluntary sector is for. The voluntary sector is to help people out voluntarily, not forced.
What are you finding, Sally, is the biggest sort of thing on the doorsteps for you, in your constituency?
Folk are just absolutely fed up with the party political clones, and this is Conservatives as well. It's just they don't like Boris and the attitude, the just rampant corruption. I mean, this is people who are not necessarily for independence for Scotland, but they're looking and they're seeing incompetent, corrupt buffoons, and they don't want to vote for them. And this level of corruption is beyond anything I've ever seen in my 55 years. It's just there's not even a pretense at respectability and appearances. I mean, if you think back, I was a teenager in the Thatcher years, and if you think back to then, we all knew they were at it, but there was a line that they didn't cross, which was if you got caught red-handed, there was nothing you could do, and they would have to be sacrificed, you know. I'm not saying that they didn't get back later on in the back, round the back door, but there was appearances to be upheld, and Conservatives, even of Thatcher's era, knew that. Gone, they don't give a hoot. They really couldn't give a monkeys, and a lot of businesses are suffering, and quality of food is a way to go right down to American standards. At the same time, the health service, and a lot of these people realise just how valuable the health service is to them because they've holidayed in America, and they know it's the number one source of bankruptcy, and they know it's a really bad system of healthcare. And you know, they're not wanting to lose their house and be made bankrupt because they get breast cancer, or you know, the usual, or a heart attack and need a heart. These are standard, sad to say, but these are standard and regular health treatments that people get in this country. And I object to the phrase that it's free. It's not free. We pay for it with our taxes. And it's approximately half our taxes go towards it. And that is the best value for money you will ever get. Because if you have to pay for health insurance in a private setting, they'll pick, the insurance company will pick and choose what ailments they will cover. And you can guarantee if it's the ailment that you have, that'll be the one they don't cover. Yeah. It's just, we're living in broken times, and I just came back in time to hear Eva talk about all the systems. All the systems are breaking or being broken across the board, and everybody on the street. And it's people who are not political, and they're all saying the same thing, and it's deliberate. It's deliberate, it's calculated, and the people who would least expect to be aware of that are the ones that are talking about it. And how many times are we hearing now? I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but you know, and when you follow the evidence, there's no but about it. It's everything from the potholes. I don't know if I said this the last time, but in the Carsagowrie we had bus services reduced. Well, it was the early morning one that took the staff to 9 Wells. So then the staff had to take their cars to work, which meant there was no parking spaces for the patients, which meant the patients were arriving in good time, driving around in a big circle, going in late and stressed out. And then if it was something to do with their heart, it meant they were too stressed and their blood pressure too high to actually do that procedure, which meant another appointment had to be made. And for all the staff are then playing catch up throughout the day because every appointment's been slightly late, slightly late, slightly late. And it's spending more time calming the patients down. Then as that progresses throughout the months, the staff are getting more stressed and hard work and run ragged, so they're going off sick more often, so it's an even bigger workload for want of a bus. All for the want of a bus. But coincidentally, that enabled certain local politicians to fill a hall in the Carsagowrie with a meeting to say that they would sort it. Well, it turns out they could sort it because the buses are on a fixed contract and they were breaching their contract by not putting those buses on in the lead up to a general election. And they cut the one bus that everybody would notice straight away, which is most bizarre, isn't it? Normally when a bus company's looking to cut back a bit, they do the sleepy one in the afternoon or the sleepy one in the mid-evening so that people don't notice immediately. Well,
okay, you know me, coincidences in politics don't mix, Sally. They don't mix.
They don't, but once you start seeing that, I mean, back in probably 15 or 2016, it was pointed out to me that in Aberdeen in the winter, there was a Tory council and they didn't deliberately, I don't know how true this is, but they may have delayed gritting the pavements quite deliberately because it always made A&E patients rolling up to A&E, the numbers increased because of that, because there's more slips and falls. Right, so there is a book of dirty tricks in politics where the politicians know who to phone to cut back on buses so that they can fill a hall and solve the problem, like miracle workers and that. But
I sometimes say I'm very cynical, but the more I come on this programme, the more I think the rest of you are more cynical than even me. And I have no love of Tories, but they want to send people to A&E.
It's just
it's a bit of a stretch even for me. And I've got no kind words for them. Eva, what do you see as the main topics for the people? I mean, people are more worried about their bins than what our foreign policy is over the Chagos Islands, aren't they?
I think that many people are, because they're not switched on to politics because something switched them off a while ago. And in recent years, I would go back to the expenses scandal, 2008, 9, 10, etc. Because up until then, folk would say that they tended not to trust parliamentarians because they were in it for themselves. But by Jove, none of us understood just how many of them were in it exactly for themselves until we saw those expenses unredacted and saw some of the ridiculous claims. And then we saw prosecutions and MPs sent to prison. So I don't think the political system at Westminster has recovered since then. But from a Scottish perspective, what we've seen is that the Labour feeble 50 to whom we used to refer ended up being replaced by almost a different set of feeble 50 who replicated, to a point, the conduct of the Labour people. And that's what's switched people off. So to energise not just the grassroots of the independence movement, but to energise the electorate generally in Scotland, needs people who are honest and able to be trusted, that the general population feel they can actually put their trust in. And in that regard, I come back to independence for independence because of the Scottish phrase, "I kent his father." Well, a lot of people I'll be asking to vote for me will have kent my father, or my cousins, or my mother, or my grandparents, or they knew me because they went to school with me, or they worked beside me. They don't necessarily all like me, but they certainly know me. And I think that is a good thing, and it's a way to turn politics back into what it should be, because it should be about making the country a better place rather than lining one's personal pocket or, slurping off the gravy train, which is what most people think politicians are there to do. And sometimes it's very difficult to argue with them. Once you get people talking about politics, though, they want politicians to sort out the bread and butter issues. And it is health, and education. And yes, it is, how often do the bins get emptied? And why do I have to pay council tax and on top of that pay for a permit to get my garden bin emptied? The amount of topics that politicians get involved in that are, you know, very minor, they've got nothing to do with foreign policy or defence on the face of it, but when you look at the bigger picture, they've often got a lot to do with immigration, particularly because we know that some of the staff shortages within the NHS and within the care system are down in part to problems that we have with not controlling our own immigration policies. Mm-hmm. So when you get into dialogue with folk that have got problems, you see that actually everything comes back to the question of resources and priorities. If you chapped most doors in Alloa and Grangemouth and asked folk what did they think about having weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde, they would tell you to get them the hell out of there. If you asked folk what did they want by way of education provision, they would say that they want education free for all, not just for children or teenagers, but for people who are older, so that, you know, older folk can go back to study, make life better for themselves and for society. If you ask folk what they want in the NHS, nobody wants to have to pay extra for the NHS. We fund it through our taxes and by the resources of our country. Ordinary folk, once they get talking about politics, are full of good ideas. It's the party politicians that twist and turn and make the mistakes. And they're mistakes from the perspective of the electorate, but they're very, very deliberate actions on the part of the politicians.
I've got to say, I was forecasting a while ago that I expected there would be a unionist victory in this upcoming general election. And I'm not going to be, for want of a better word, I'm not going to be disappointed with my forecast. It's going to be a Pyrrhic victory, though, in my opinion, because I believe that the independence movement will regroup after this. But people should understand, if you're voting, I mean, we're not going to notice a difference. If you think this, if you buy into this, oh, we need the change, everyone wants a change, not much is going to change. And if you feel angry at the SNP, as you alluded to earlier, don't go and vote for a unionist. Don't do it, folks. Because when Labour come in, Alan, they're going to be every bit as vicious as the Tories to the Scottish people.
If you think back to the last Labour government, 97, the workers were jubilant. They thought we were finally going to get some workers' rights back from the Thatcher years. No, we didn't. We got nothing. In fact, we got more anti-trade union laws brought in, because Tony Blair was as much of a Thatcherite as Thatcher was. Then if you look at they were saying that we're going to help eradicate poverty. Gordon Brown brought in a budget that put 100% increase on the lowest taxpayers. He raised the tax from 10% to 20%, doubling the tax of every single low-paid worker, putting people further and further into poverty. The only change that Westminster's offering is change of bums on the seats, because the policies are exactly the same. Just that Labour are a bit nicer at putting it forward, but they're going to shaft you. Make no doubt about that. Now, this election is really Scotland's spider event. We've got to start thinking again. We've got to regroup. And when we regroup, we unite one another, and we take our fight to the 26th election, and we kick every single unionist out of that parliament on a proper Scotland United ticket, where we have people on the list and people on the constituency. So every single one of those votes count. And we kick those, not just a super majority, but a total wipeout of unionist vote from that parliament. And don't talk to me about, but democracy, people have voted for unionists. I don't care. I care about my country becoming free. And we will do it every way that we possibly can, because they've done it for the past hundreds of years. It's time for us to stop being nice and putting our country first, party second. Make sure our people's voices are heard. That's the only way to do this. They play dirty, we play dirty.
Here. Because actually, I'm not mistaken, it might even be in your seat, Eva. I don't think there's a Tory standing, is there? Or at least not declared yet. And I've heard in a few seats, Labour are not standing against the Tories, and Tories are not standing against the Labour. They're more interested in getting the SNP out than the unions. They're better together still. No one's talking about them gaming the system, Sally. no one's saying that, well, that's when we try it, it's gaming the system and it shouldn't be done. But the unionists are doing everything to maximise their vote in this election, aren't they?
Definitely, and they keep doing that, and they keep trying to guilt the yes movement into playing by the rules, but at the drop of a hat, they'll move the goalposts on the rules. You know, they wrote the rule book, and they're quite happy to break the rule book just whenever it suits them, but always to try and put us on the back foot. So I've been asked, would I abstain? And at the moment, I don't think the voters in Scotland are ready for that. But there's no way I'm removing it from the toolbox. There's no way I'm removing it from the toolbox. And Alan submitted a letter to Westminster, and I've signed it. And I'm not swearing an oath to the king. I'm anti-monarchy. I wouldn't go as far as chopping their heads off. I'd kind of reduce them to one palace, but and quiet retirement, and off you go and start. Good luck getting a job, boys. But that's as soon as any politician that either claims to be socialist or anti-monarchy or wants independence for Scotland swears an oath, that particular oath down in Westminster to Charles or his offspring, that's an abject surrender. And I have been lectured from dignitaries of the Yes movement that you just cross your fingers behind your back and everybody knows you don't mean it. And I'm sorry, but you do that with the electorate, you've lost all credibility. And you do that with yourself, you've lost all credibility. So we're looking to fight that under the Equalities Law, and it's their law. And no doubt they'll move the goalposts on that again, but we shall see how it goes, because and from a tactical point of view, my skill set was 25 years in the police, and that's stuff you learn on the beat there that you don't learn in a book. And you look for the pressure points, you look to do the inquiry and find out who's been taking money from which companies and for what purpose. And then you start to divide and conquer, because you start publicising that information in their constituencies so that their public know what a rogue that they've elected. And this business of, well, you mustn't, you keep to your own wee constituency and you never say a bad word about any other honourable member. Well, no, so that if the member is corrupt and on the take, I'm quite happy. I'll go leafleting in their campaign, and if that's South London or North Yorkshire, then I'll just do it.
Right, too.
As long as it's accurate and true, they can take me to court. Sod them.
Well, I think you should.
Wily, really, really clever and wily, because playing this, and we're all victims of this in terms of we're sensible people and we like to get things done. So you think practically, and that is a railway track, right? That keeps us locked into this system, because that's thinking decent. We need to start thinking wily, because this whole Westminster system has been rigged so that no matter how well we do, they will change the rules and move the goalposts on us, especially if it looks like we're going to win.
What I would suggest is you take your police training with you when you do go to Westminster, and take your pepper spray and your baton with you, and use them both liberally around the Tory benches, I would say, and the Labour benches. Two cheeks of the same arse, as far as I'm concerned. We're coming towards the end, Eva, of the show. We need some positivity here, Eva. Send the viewers away with a smile on their face and tell them how it's going to get better, how they can make it better.
News just breaking just now, Roddy, might give a little cause for optimism. You'll remember Michael Matheson in the iPad £11,000 expense issue. And last week, John Swinney said he could not support the sanction that was recommended be imposed upon him. And we've watched that slow car crash develop over many, many, many months. Well, tonight it seems that John Swinney's changed his mind, and it's likely that he's asking his SNP MSPs to vote for the sanctions to be imposed upon Michael Matheson. Can I suggest that the cause for optimism is simply that perhaps justice and common sense have actually prevailed for once, when all of this should have been sorted out a very, very long time ago? So I think there's hope for the Scottish independence movement, but it requires leadership from the likes of John Swinney and others, including Alex Salmond and Colette Walker from the ISP, and Sally and me and any other people that want to stand for independence, to be getting together and talking rationally and sensibly about how to do a good job for the people of Scotland. Because what the people of Scotland don't need is the opposite from the Better Together campaign, as was alluded to earlier. We need a true Scotland United campaign where every single candidate who stands for Scottish independence and means it maximises their personal vote, thereby maximising the number of MPs empowered by the people of Scotland to negotiate the terms of the independence settlement and set about building the country that Scotland is supposed to be.
Here. And on that note, folks, these three wonderful people need your support and help. And it's now about getting your boots on and getting ready to get out there. Now, you don't often get summer elections. You know, we're lucky people on this occasion. In fact, I can't remember the last time we had a summer election. I can't remember. But a few of the European ones have been late, but never a general election, always freezing. So get yourselves available. We've been running it all through the show here, where you can go, how you can help these people, and how you can help yourselves, because it's not them you're helping yourselves. If we put Sally and Eva down into that cesspit in London, and Alan gets tens of thousands of not my parliaments throughout Scotland, we are sending a message. We are saying, at this moment, Labour might have a wee small victory. The Tories might have held on to a couple of seats, but we're here, we're waiting, and we're ready, we're regrouping, and we're coming back, and we're coming back with a vengeance. But we need to get our act together. All the parties, stop putting your parties first and start putting our nation first. Start putting the nation first and we'll start making inroads. So, my dear friends, until we see you all again, please, you and yours, take care.
Bye.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.